Hi, now we've got our disassembled CCU here. I'm going to show you how to put these back together. Take your housing, hold it in an upside down, bottom up position. Your rear buffer has the flat spot across there, and that just goes straight in here. It needs to be oriented 90, the flat spot needs to be 90 degrees to the bottom of the unit, of the housing, and then it will just drop through into place. I'm going to put our stock adapter on over the bolt, washer, nylon nut. Now the stock adapter, the M4 stock adapter and the fixed stock both use that same nut and washer, and the telestock uses its own specialty nut because it's a different design. And we're going to take it down just outside of being quite tight, because we'd like that flat spot that I showed you on the rear buffer, like that to be flat across the back of the unit, or as flat as we can get it. So I'm going to use this little plastic block across the top of that silver plate to kind of hold it in place while I go ahead and tighten it. And it doesn't have to be uber tight, it just has to be snug, like that. And check the plate, yep, it's good. Now that's done. That plate mainly needs to be flat for the 1911 models, because your pistol actually goes in over the top of that bumper, and if it's not pretty flat, you might have a little bit of trouble getting your rails to go inside the housing. For the Glock and the XD, it's mainly a cosmetic deal, so that's why we do that flat. Now we're ready. We usually put a little spritz of oil down the tube. Now we're going to put our barrel and bolt channel assemblies together. So we've got our bolt channel and our barrel. We've got to put what we call the front buffer over the barrel with the notch up so that it frames the post there. And now we're recommending essentially no oil inside the channel, no oil around the firing pin insert, which is this piece. You can see the firing pin right there, and it's moving freely. If much oil gets inside that firing pin, it'll hold on to junk like spent powder, dirt, whatever, and it'll gum that firing pin up, and then you'll have some issues with it. So we're recommending essentially no oil, except maybe right along here, the bottom of the channel, where it rides on the top of the barrel. So just going to put a couple of drops of rem oil on there. You don't need much. Spread it around a little bit. That's good enough. I'm going to put those together like that. Now we've got our recoil spring. You will have noticed, and we get comments every once in a while, hey, what's that foamy stuff inside the recoil spring? Well, we do actually spray a little bit of insulating foam in there, and what it does is it helps dampen the spring noise when the CCU is in operation. Without that foam, it gets a little loud, kind of like the spring noise in an AR. And then we're going to use, we made our own little dental pick, if you will, for putting these springs on and taking them off. But a dental pick, hobby shops have them. You can even use needle nose pliers possibly. There's not a lot of space around this post inside these loops, so that's why we used a small flat blade screwdriver and just heated it up and bent it into the shape of a pick. But you can pull that forward and drop it on there, and that way the spring doesn't receive any damage while it's being installed. Now we can do a little bit of oil on the outside of the unit. For that, we usually use the can of spray oil, and it's just a quick spray down each side. That's really about all the oil these things need to run. Being a blowback action, you don't want a lot of oil because it'll cause a hydraulic situation inside the tube, and it can actually slightly slow down your the operation of your channel. So now holding the housing in this hand, because I'm right-handed, and I hold it up front here because otherwise you can get kind of pinched as things slide in. Hold the barrel by the assembly by the barrel and just slide it right in to place. I'm going to slide it in until these 4 screws are lined up on one side, and I'm going to put these screws in. This takes a 9/64 hex wrench or Allen wrench, and I'm going to put it in there, get the first one in, and make sure I've got some wiggle. If I don't, that means I've pinched the housing, and that's going to cause you problems with feeding when you go to use the unit. But once the first one's in, the rest of them will go right in and will not pinch the housing. If the first one pinches the housing, they will all pinch the housing. Just like that. Okay, so I've got my first set in. I'm going to grab my foregrip that I forgot to get before the video started, and I'm going to line up these 4 holes. You know, it goes on in this orientation. So I'm going to line up those screw heads inside those 4 holes on this side and snap it around, kind of hinging on those screw heads. And I'm going to make sure that it's pushed all the way around so that these holes line up the best. And I'm going to put these screws in just like that. And this first one, you might have to kind of move back against the top of the hole just a little bit. You don't always have to do that. Yep, that one's going in just fine. And then the rest of them will go in. Okay. Now I'm going to attach the bolt, and this guy takes a 5/32 hex wrench, and get it started there, and then spin it on down, and just make sure it's nice and snug. Again, nothing has to be extremely tight, just a good and snug down. You know, for the guys that like to talk in torques or inch pounds, these are in there that are, I would say, around 20 inch-pounds of pressure. This one, I'm not sure, about the same, maybe a little bit more. Those things aren't real exact as long as they're nice and snug. Now we've got our Glock Ejector, and that's going to go in this side of the housing underneath the strap, oriented this way. It's just the opposite for the XD disconnect spring. So far the XD is exactly the same as this Glock unit, except when you get to this spring, the disconnect spring on the XD is on the opposite side of the housing. It's over here. The hole will be over here, but it essentially goes in the same way. Got to go down there, and this small screw takes a 5/64 hex wrench, and we're going to put just a drop of Loctite 242. That's the blue, obviously, the Loctite on there. You don't need much. Get it in there, and I'm going to push it up against the side of the housing here with my other hand as I tighten that screw. Get it good and snug. If you're doing the XD disconnect, you want to push it up against its side of the housing as you tighten the screw on the XD. There we have the Glock or your XD unit all put together. It's running smoothly. Now I'm going to show you one difference between the Glock XD and the 1911. With your 1911 here, I've already got my bolt, channel, and barrel assembly put together. you have, with the 1911, we have this safety spring. And it's got to go in and be trapped by the housing. So there's my oil there. Gonna get myself a little bit of oil on the bowl. Again, if you don't have a spray oil, a couple of drops and distribute it with a cloth or your finger is all you need. Now, for the 1911, I'm gonna set the housing upside down here. I'm going to roll this upside down. Now you've got to support it because that barrel can fall free of the insert. The hood doesn't necessarily hold it inside the insert. And so the spring goes back in the little hole up here around the back side of the channel and then springs down over that arm in the channel. And that's got to go into the housing this way. And as soon as you've got it in, like that, then you can turn it back over and slide it all the way into place. And now you're back to putting in the screws in your barrel support like we did the Glock. That's really all there is to doing that. Then you can put on the rest of your rails if you've had to take anything off. If you have any questions, please feel free to give us a call. We're here Monday through Thursday from 8 to 3 Mountain Time, and we'll give you any help you need. Thanks very much for watching.